the last thing he said was, for me, Daniel, my thoughts troubled me, my countenance changed in me. Remember we said we are also troubled with all these prophecies. We are also troubled, our countenance, how your face looks, your fear, I've been having some pain with this nail that I cut. So, in this morning, I bumped it again, and it's just blood all over the place. And I'm just thinking, I'm so heartful now. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go climb into bed because I feel sorry for myself. And I think constant pain, constant hunger, constant stress, those kind of things can really wear you down. So he kept the whole matter in his heart, Daniel 7:28. The whole thing about Daniel and why it took so long was because it was about the changing of times and laws. And times and laws in terms of the ordinances that God gave. The times and the laws are the ordinances, the instellings, stuff that Yahuwah ordained. So I actually this morning stumbled over a very interesting verse. I'm going to read it for you. Because everything in prophecy is for the end days. Even with Daniel, the angel tells him the whole time, it's for the end, it's for the end, it's for the end. No? And everything in Jeremiah, and there's a lot of things about the second coming and the millennium in Zechariah. Everything is regarding the end. Because in the end, God will have a great reset, won't he? And it will go back to how it was in the beginning. So he's going to recreate heaven and earth. He made heaven and earth in Genesis, and then in Revelation, at after the second coming, you've got the millennium, and then you've got the second resurrection, and then God comes out of heaven with a new Jerusalem, and then he burns everything up. All the people in the second resurrection, as well as heaven and earth. You've seen that in Revelation?
Yes.
Okay. So he's basically going to make then a new heaven and new earth. So it's like a full circle back to his original plan. Listen to this in Isaiah 24. Behold, Yahuwah makes the earth empty. When is he going to do that? He makes the earth waste. He turns it upside down. He scatters abroad the inhabitants thereof. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for Yahuwah has spoken this word. The earth mourns and fades away. The world languishes. You languish away. Jy teer weg. And you fade away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth is defiled under the people. Because, and it's not me saying this, it's Isaiah 24:5. The whole earth, remember, creation was perfect, and then we sinned, Adam and Eve, man and woman, we sinned, and then the earth also received the curse. So since then up to now, the earth is languishing under the curse. So the earth is defiled, and because the people transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broke the everlasting covenant. So here's the changing of the ordinances. That is the second witness to the changing of the times and laws, which are ordinances of the Antichrist. So here in Isaiah 24, it's prophesied that God destroys everything. Nature, heaven, earth, plants, animals, humans. At the second resurrection, when he comes after the millennium, he destroys everything. And then he starts all over again back to plan A, because God doesn't have a plan B. Isaiah 24:6, I'm ending with that. Therefore has the curse devoured the earth. Wherefore has the curse devoured the earth? Because they broke the laws, changed the ordinances, and nullified the eternal covenant. They that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned up. So when does all this happen? When you look at the total span of time, you know that it hasn't happened yet. A lot of people say, oh yeah, he has destroyed Jerusalem. No, this says the entire earth and all the inhabitants are burned up.
It's the end of the millennium then. Yeah.
It's at the end of the millennium. And who is part of everything that's burned up? You look at verse 5, which for me is it's a beautiful way in which he says, the earth is defiled. I'm busy now with the Revelation studies. Somebody asked, a lot of people have been asking for the Revelation timeline. It's almost impossible because all of Daniel fits into the Revelation timeline. But as I work through the Revelation timeline, there's a lot about nature, where nature is crying out because of the curse and the defilement, and nature is expecting the revelation of God's people, and nature is going to witness against humans. So there's a lot about nature in the Revelation studies. Again, it's full circle from Revelation back to Genesis, because he said he declares the end out of the beginning. So why is the earth and everyone burnt up? Because they transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant.
So that's in the millennium then. That's the people in the millennium also.
That's everybody that is going to be burnt up. So if you look at the sequence, you've got the second coming, you've got the first resurrection, you've got the millennium, then you've got the second resurrection. So those in the first resurrection has immortal bodies.
Yeah.
They're not part of this being burned up.
So it's the people in the millennium, yeah.
It's all the people that have survived Armageddon, that's in the millennium, as well as everybody that is then part of the second resurrection after the millennium.
So, but that's actually sinful people going into the millennium.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So if you look at the prophets...
not believers actually.
No, exactly.
It's just, that's the ones that
anyone
survived.
that doesn't have part in the first resurrection...
Yeah.
There's only one option left,
Okay.
the second resurrection. Blessed is he who does not have part in the second resurrection, because that one you don't want to be part of. So it will be horrible when you wake up and you're like, oh, it's the first resurrection. Oh shit, no, it's the second resurrection. No, we are laughing, but I think I've many times wondered about this, and I said, you know, how arrogant am I to think I'll be part of the first resurrection? It's a very arrogant thought. It's all about grace. It is absolutely. If it's not about him, you know, then you wake up and you realize, oof, no, second resurrection, I didn't make it. So, but anyway. But blessed is he who has part in the first one, because then he won't be burned up in the second one. Okay, so Daniel 8. What I did, I started comparing. I basically took Daniel, the chapter, and I divided it in two because it runs concurrently. So in the first verse to about the 15th verse, you've got one explanation. And then from the 15th verse onwards, well, in the first part, you've got the vision. And then in the second part of the chapter, you've got the explanation. It's very similar to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. In Genesis 1, you've got the sequence of how everything is created. And then in Genesis 2, you've got a bit more explanation, like a historical overview. And a lot of people say, oh no, Genesis 1 is one creation and Genesis 2 is another creation. There was 2 Adams and there was 2 worlds and then there was this. No, it's not biblical. But anyway, let's start. Daniel 8 verse 1.
It's a long chapter.
It's a long chapter, yeah. Daniel's vision of the ram and the goat. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto Daniel. After that which appeared unto him at the first. So what appeared unto him at the first? What was the first vision that appeared to him? It was the 4 beasts,
Yeah, the 4
and
beasts.
the statue and
Yeah.
no, the
Yeah,
statue.
statue,
Yeah, it was the 4 beasts. Now he's seeing a second vision, and he's linking it already to the first vision about the beasts. So there is a link to that, and we're going to continue now to see that it's indeed so. I saw a vision. It came to pass when I saw, I was at Shushan in the palace, which is where? In the province of Elam. And I saw a vision, and as I was by the river of Ulai.
Yeah. I just want to come in here with that Shushan of Susa.
Lily.
Which is outside Babylon, by the way. But the fact that it's that they say in the province of Elam is actually one of the proofs that Daniel was written in the time of Daniel by Daniel and not in the, for example, Maccabean time. Because that province Elam didn't exist anymore in the time of, let's say, 1000, 2000 BC.
So that's very good,
that's
no?
That's
That's archaeological proof.
Exactly. So the archaeology can prove there was a province like that, But the Maccabees, for example, in that time, they didn't know about it because it wasn't called that anymore. So again, they couldn't have written it in that time.
Yeah, because
now we know.
The claim is Daniel was written afterwards.
Yes, because
it's too true.
Exactly.
Yeah. And even your contemporary historical records can probably also prove that in the time of the Maccabees and thereon, they never spoke about the province of Elam.
No, they didn't.
It was
it
probably called
it
didn't exist.
It didn't exist anymore.
It only existed in the time of Daniel.
Exactly, so they couldn't have known about Elam because it didn't exist anymore. But archaeological proof now shows there was a province of Elam in that time of Daniel.
Amazing, wonderful, perfect. Take that.
Yeah, exactly.
You naysayers. Okay, but Shushan, for me, it's beautiful. It means lily. As you know, these white lilies. So even Yeshua is called the lily of the valley. No? So it's all about whiteness. So Daniel was here in this palace that's called Shushan. Obviously, the Babylonians aren't white, the white clothes of the bride. But Daniel is there and he's white. He's holy within all that Babylonian Grusmus where he finds himself. So,
he was in a vision there. He wasn't really there.
Well, and I saw in a vision, it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan.
In the vision.
In the palace, which is in the province of Elam.
Yeah.
And I saw a vision.
But that was outside. Shushan was outside Babylon. It was in
but remember, if you go back to Daniel 1 or Daniel 3, Daniel was over all the princes.
Yeah, but if you like now in Babylon and you have a vision, so then you must make the quick time travel to another province. I think it's like he saw that he was in the vision there. That's possible in the vision.
Yeah, but the verse says he was there. Remember, he was traveling also. He was in charge of all the provinces. Remember, him and his 3 friends were promoted. They were in charge of everyone. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't say he was in Babylon and now he had a vision of Shushan. He says here he was in Shushan when he had the vision. So he probably traveled. But it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but it says physically, I was at Shushan in the province of Elam. Shushan means lily, whiteness. Elam means hidden. In the time of Daniel, most people, well, even Daniel himself, didn't understand these visions. And at one stage, the angel told him, seal up the visions, because it's not for you to understand. It is for the people of the time of the end. So how coincidental is it? Whether he was there or the vision was there or he was himself there, it happened at Elam, which means hidden, distant, veiled from sight, concealed, secret. Isn't that amazing? Okay. So he is, in verse 15, he continues to say, it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought for the meaning. Then behold, there stood before me the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai. So whether he was physically on the river banks of Ulai, or like you say, maybe his vision was of the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So there was obviously a voice that instructed Gabriel to help Daniel understand the vision. So Gabriel came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and I fell upon my face. See, he doesn't fall backwards like the churches do. But he said unto me, understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. So we can pray, Father, please can Yeshua come tomorrow? Please can this happen? Please. No, it's not going to happen. Why will God go outside his appointed times? He set times for everything to happen. There's a time set for the Antichrist. It's a time set for the dragon to rule. There's a time set for the first and the second resurrection. He's not going to go outside of that. Where did he set these times? Or when did he set these times?
What verse are we now? You jumped a bit to 15 or what?
Yes, I did say verse 15.
Okay.
15.
15.
No, you jumped.
Wow.
So if you struggle to follow, just ask me which verse, or rather just listen.
Okay.
Because like I said, I divided the chapter in two.
Mm-hmm.
So verse 1 and 2 explains where he got the vision. And then verse 15 to 19, he's now explaining a bit more the situation of the vision.
Okay.
And what happened.
So this is just now an overview that you're doing.
Now I'm going through all the verses. So it's verse by verse. I'm comparing the first half of the chapter
Yes, to the second.
half of the chapter.
Right.
So verse 1 and 2, he told us where he was and when he was there. And then verse 15 to 17, to 19, he said he got the vision, and then the angel came and explained to him and helped him to understand. And the angel said, I'll make you known what's going to happen in the end days.
For the end days, yeah.
For at the time appointed the end shall be, in verse 19. So my question was, when did God appoint these times?
In the beginning. Before the end, before the creation even.
Yes, I agree with you. Why do you say that?
Because everything was his plan. Everything was appointed by him.
He appointed everything in advance.
Exactly.
And he's not going to go outside of his appointed times. Okay. And in terms of the age of the earth, 6,000 years plus the millennium. So if you look at that whole creation week, you see this whole full circle the whole time, going back to creation. So at creation, he set everything up. Remember, he put the sun, moon, and stars in the sky to also show the appointed times, the Moedim. And there are 7 feasts. And when you look at the 7 feasts, you had the first coming with Pesach, and then you had Pentecost, and then the second coming will be with Yom Teruah. So everything was set up in advance. He works according to his plan A. Okay. So let's continue back to verse 3. He said he was there by the river, and there in the city of Shushan, in the province of Elam. And now in verse 3 he says, Then I lifted up my eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. Is this why you think even the vision was not physically at the river, but it was a vision of the river?
Yeah.
Okay. So he stood before the river, a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high. So it was big horns, ne? One was higher than the other. And the higher one came up last. Interesting. So obviously, in verse 20 now, if you jump to verse 20, it says, the ram that you saw had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were the kings of the Medes and the Persians. So who came up first? The Medes or the Persians?
The Medes.
The Medes was first. And then the Persians came up after the Medes. They were
Stronger.
And the 2 kings.
Well, the kings of the Medes and the kings of the king of the Persians, and they actually had an alliance.
Yes.
That's why it's called the Medes and the Persians. They worked together. They had an alliance. But the Persians were stronger than the Medes. So here the one horn was higher than the other horn. Can you remember which beast represented the Medes and the Persians in Daniel's first vision?
The bear.
And how do we know the bear represented the Medes and the Persians?
I think he got 2...
No, 3.
3. Oh.
He had 3 ribs in his mouth
Yeah.
because, whatever. But what else? What else? The 3 ribs was about the 3 conquests. It said
He was strong.
he was strong and he was walking, but his one shoulder was, remember, higher than the other shoulder. Remember that? So it's exactly the same as the ram. So the ram and the bear is representing the Medes and the Persians. What metal represented the Medes and the Persians?
The silver.
Silver, the breast of silver. Okay. So we don't have to guess who the ram is or who the two horns are, because Daniel 8 verse 20 tells us.
Yeah.
Okay, Daniel 8 verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westwards, northwards, and southwards. So the ram is the Medes and the Persians. So where Persia is, Iran, Iran today. So from there, they pushed west, they pushed north, and they pushed south. They didn't push east, because there was not much there.
They come from there.
Yeah, you see. Again, proving even political, historical texts.
Yeah.
Okay. So that no beast might stand before him, neither was there anyone that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and he became great. So the Medes and the Persians became great. They conquered everything. Those 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear, they had north, west, and south. You see, that 3 areas. So that's why the 3 ribs are there. Because they only had that 3 areas in which they pushed.
Yeah.
And they conquered, and nobody was able to overcome them. So remember the Persian king, even in the time of Daniel, Daniel served the Persian king. And then times after, you had Ezra and Nehemiah, who served the Persian king. Remember?
The Antixerxes or Xerxes.
Antixerxes. He was a Persian king, remember? So Daniel 8 verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, because he came by ship. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So the ram is the Medes and the Persians, and now the goat comes from the west, not from the east, not from the north, not from the south. So again, you go to historical, political writings, it's exactly what happened.
The Greek.
So now we jump to Daniel 8 verse 21. The rough goat is the king of Greece. We don't have to guess.
Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
Alexander the Great. Remember what animal represented Alexander the Great?
Leopard.
And the leopard had how many heads?
4.
Interesting, ne?
Yeah.
So the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So who's this great horn on the goat?
That's Alexander the
It's
Great.
Alexander the Great. Verse 22. Now, when that great horn, when Alexander the Great was broken, 4 horns stood up in its place. 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of that nation, but not in his power. So, when Alexander the Great died, his 4 generals took his place, but they were never as great as Alexander was. All right. So, how many heads did the leopard have? 4. And the leopard represented Greece. And now the goat, when the one horn broke, 4 horns come up. So you can see direct correlation. Right. What color was in the statue? What color was bronze? Name. Back to Daniel 8 verse 6. And he came to the ram. Who's this now?
Alexander to
the goat.
Persian.
So the goat from the west, Alexander from the west, comes to the ram with the 2 horns. So Greece comes to Medes and Persians. Alexander the Great comes to the Persian king. And he came to the ram who had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power. So Greece ran straight into Persia and destroyed Persia. And there the Greeks took over. Verse 7. And I saw him come close unto the ram. So the goat, Alexander the Great, came close to the Persian king, and he was moved with choler. What does your translation say?
Choler, but I'm at the King James.
Now quickly check for us. I forgot to check. I wanted to check it still. I forgot.
What verse is it again?
It's verse 7.
7 in the...
It must be with power, with anger,
So
with cunning.
Broke his 2 horns, is it that one?
Okay, I saw
Smote the
him
ram.
close to the
Yeah.
ram. He was enraged.
Raged, okay.
Enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. Yeah.
So
In the ears.
Alexander the Great came to the Persian king with anger and fury and might and power. And he smote the ram and broke the 2 horns. So the Medes and Persian political power is now destroyed. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. So he conquered the Medes and the Persians. But he cast him down to the ground, and he stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So the goat overpowered the ram. Alexander the Great overpowered the Medes and the Persians. Okay. So just to remind you, Daniel 8 verse 22, now that being broken, Alexander the Great, the horn of the goat, 4 stood up, 4 kingdoms stand up out of that nation, but not in the original power of the first horn. Right, Daniel 8 verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed great. So Greece waxed great. They became a great nation. When he was strong, so Alexander, when he was at his strongest, the great horn was broken. And that's true. Alexander, in the
Died early.
flare of his youth, in the pinnacle of his youth, at his strongest point, he died, right? And 4, it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So his 4 generals took over. And because, remember, the goat, there was nobody that could stand in front of him. He overpowered everyone. He was basically the world ruler. That's why it says the 4 notable horns is now towards the 4 winds of earth. Because each one of them gets a section, a direction. Okay. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south. And towards the east. And towards the...
Pleasant land.
Pleasant.
What is the pleasant land?
Israel.
There's only one pleasant land on this earth. And that's Israel. Right. Who's this talking about?
Antiochus.
Oh, you're so clever. Antiochus Epiphanes. Out of the 4 rulers of the Greek Empire came this little horn. What does that make you think about? This little horn.
Antichrist.
Exactly. How many times have we discussed the little horn, which is the Antichrist? And now God is telling us that Antiochus Epiphanes is a huge prophetic picture of the exact same little horn. Okay, you got it, no? And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. I'm going to say something about that just now. Let's just go to Daniel 8 verse 23. Because we read now that the goat waxed great over all the earth. Out of the 4 kings, 1 king stood up that was horrible. He was so mighty and so strong, he even cast down some of the host of heaven. So who's the host of heaven?
Is it, that's like the angels and so on? The
Angels?
army, you can say what's it?
The army?
Hemelse leermag.
Die hemelse leermag.
Yeah.
But it's also stars.
Oh.
Because the host of the heaven, God gave the sun, the moon, and the stars, the host of heaven, to the pagans to worship. So when you look at host of heaven, it is actually both. Because many of the stars in heaven are also angelic beings. Remember what Peter and Jude and Enoch talks about. And I have discussed this in some online meetings as well, where I showed you all the verses, where a lot of these fallen angel entities were also locked up in positions in the constellation. That's where planetes, the wandering stars and those. That's that whole discussion. That's why when
That's now ancient aliens.
No, it's absolutely. Now listen, I love ancient aliens. But remember what Revelation says. A star fell from heaven, and unto him was the key to the bottomless pit given, and he opened the bottomless pit. So there are many verses. But the fact of the matter is, Antiochus Epiphanes, if you look at the whole Roman pantheon and the mythology and the Greek gods and goddesses, these are all epitomes of the heavenly host, which they worship. And that's why the heavenly host had these pagan gods' names and stuff like that. So in verse 23, it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, so we are now busy with the goat and the four horns and the little horn that came up after the four horns, or within the four horns, ne? And it says in verse 23, at the latter time of their kingdom, so in the last days of the kingdoms of these four kings, when the transgressors are come to the full. When the transgressors against what? Against the God of Israel. When the transgression against the Creator God became full, their paganism, their idol worship, their abominations, their sacrifices, their temple worship, disgusting methods, it became full. A king of fierce countenance, a king who understands dark sentences, shall stand up. Is it now still talking about Antiochus?
I think it's a Roman now,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And in the latter time of their kingdom,
Yeah.
when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance, who understands dark sentences, shall stand up. Let's not say who it is. Let's continue reading. We can come back to this one.
Maybe it's Caesar.
Yeah, he had a fierce countenance, yeah, and he killed and destroyed many people, absolutely. Did he understand dark sentences? Because these dark sentences is also all over Scripture. It's said about Yeshua as well. He says he comes and he speaks in parables. He speaks in hidden language. He speaks in dark utterances. So when it comes to what is said about Messiah, is also what is said on the opposite about the anti-Messiah. So this is looking through the whole Greek system, because remember today we are in Roman law, but the Roman law, the Roman Catholic Church have inherited all their traditions from the Greeks. So it's called the Greek pantheon. You know, there's it's a little bit of a joke. You know, when the Greek woman marries the young Greek guy, then it's like, oh, he looks like a Greek god. And then when he gets older, oh my God, you look like a Greek. Okay, I didn't blaspheme because Jehovah's name is not God. Okay, anyway, but I'll probably cut this out. But the fact of the matter is, when you talk about the gods, the idols, and the pantheon today, it's called the Greek gods. Because in the Greek period and with the Greek names, that's how everything got really set in history. When you look at the names of these gods, 99% of them are Greek. Is it not? So you look at Baal. You know, Baal was before Greek, the language even existed. But the god Baal, who's he? In the Greek pantheon. The god Tammuz, who's he? In the Greek pantheon. I'll leave it up to that for you. You can do your own research. But when you look at mythology's evolution, everything that existed long before the Greeks existed, all those gods are more known today with their Greek names than they are known with their ancient biblical names. You understand what I'm saying? So the Greek religion has a very mighty stronghold on the mythology of the world today. Okay. Back to Daniel 8 verse 9. Out of one of them came forth a little horn that waxed exceedingly great towards the south and the east and towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even so much so that it cast down some of the hosts and the stars to the ground. You see? So it's talking about both angelic beings and physical stars. Do you remember the same kind of rebellion that this little horn, we've now established its Antiochus Epiphanes. Epiphanes. Sorry, I realized the other day I'm pronounced Epiphanes. Yeah, I keep on saying Epiphanes.
It's Afrikaans.
Ja, Epiphanes is Afrikaans, julle. Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes. Alright. His rebellion as a picture of the Antichrist is exactly the same rebellion as the dragon. Who's the dragon? Satan. Who cast down 1/3 of the stars. Do you remember it says that? It says in Revelation, Satan drew 1/3 of all the stars in the heavens. But did he physically draw 1/3 of the stars and cast the stars down to heaven? No. He drew 1/3 of the angels that followed him down to earth, that was cast down. Do you remember that? You see how stars and angels are very, very, very close. So he cast down 1/3 of the sons of God and deceived them to follow him. The little horn has done the same, Antiochus, but will also do the same, the Antichrist in the last days. You need to see this the whole time. What Satan did, what this little horn in Daniel 8 does, but what is actually prophesied about the end. So he will do the same with the sons of God, which is angels, but we are also called sons of God. Right? Because ultimately, when Adam was created in the image of God. We are now no longer in the image of God. We are in the image of Adam. But ultimately back to the original plan where we will get resurrected bodies and be in the image of God again. So that's why full circle. That's why the Bible says all of nature that's crying out now, is waiting expectantly for the revelation of the sons of God. Nature is not waiting, Romans. Well done. Beautiful. Nature is not waiting for the revelation of the angels. Nature is waiting for the revelation of the sons of God. Why? Because their nature will be recreated as well. Remember when God made covenant with Abraham? He said, look up to the stars. Your seed. No, that's in the New Testament. Look up, your redemption is new, is close, but that's in the New Testament.
You say,
your seed will be as the stars in heaven. You see a correlation, stars, angel, and the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when the Antichrist is going to pull down the host of heaven, it's not only about the fallen angels, making war with the angels of God, pulling down the stars. Yeshua says all the stars are going to fall down like ripe figs, but it's also to try and draw the sons of Abraham and cast them down. Huge correlation. Once you read through the entire Bible and you try your best to remember as much as possible, and you read one verse, then all these other things comes together. Daniel 8:11. Yes, he magnifies himself. Who's he now?
It's now Antiochus.
Well, simultaneously, it's also the end day Antichrist. He magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. Who's the prince of the host? The prince of the host. Who's the host?
It's not Yeshua.
Well, who's the host? The heavenly host? Who's the host?
All the stars
and the heavenly leermag.
Yeah.
The leerskare.
Okay.
The heavenly army. Who's the prince of the heavenly army?
Yeshua.
How do you know that?
Isn't there a verse?
Yes.
That says it, Prince of...
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know where.
Joshua.
Kom
Kom julle, kom.
Oh, wait, there was a army that he saw in a vision or something. He saw the host.
No, that's
No.
Elijah.
Is that Elijah?
Before Joshua went to Jericho, the captain
Yeah,
of
okay,
the
but that's
heavenly
the one-
host. Yeah, but he didn't see an army. He only saw the captain.
Well, okay.
And the captain told him to do what? Take off his shoes. Because he was standing on holy ground.
Okay.
So that was Yahuwah manifesting on earth
Okay.
as the captain of the host, which that's Yeshua.
Yeah.
Because the New Testament says Yahuwah never appeared to anyone. Every time Yahuwah appeared, it was Yeshua that manifested in the flesh. So that's
So is ek net vir interessantheid. So it was who saw then the
Elijah.
army in
Elijah and his, or was it Elisha? I think it was Elijah. Elijah had
why-
a
for-
servant,
For what must he fight?
Gehazi. Ooh.
Elijah. Joshua had to fight a lot, but
No, he didn't have to fight. No.
But
You,
it wasn't. I'm now confused.
but remember, there's many instances. But in that specific instance, the King Ahab and the king of Israel wanted to go out and fight. So they sent the 50 soldiers to go and fetch Elijah. I think it was Elijah. I'll double check and I'll...
Yeah.
So if it's Elijah or Elisha, I can't remember, but whichever one it was. So then Elijah didn't want to go. So, and then he burned up the 50 angels, and then they sent a bigger arm, burnt up the 50 soldiers, yeah. Then they sent a bigger arm and a bigger arm and a bigger arm. And his servant Gehazi was very afraid because of this huge army that the king sent to come fetch the priest or the prophet. And then Elijah prayed that God will open the eyes of Gehazi. And he saw the heavenly host. He saw the army of angels on horses all around the mountains.
Okay.
And he said, greater is he that's with us than he that's,
Okay.
of the world.
All right. Yeah.
But Joshua only saw the captain.
Okay.
But there might be other instances where people saw the heavenly host.
I'm
When
remembering
Joshua-
of a story that they were afraid to kind of fight, and then someone saw the heavenly army or something like that. But I might be wrong now.
Yeah, I remember that's where the servant's eyes were opened, and then he
Okay.
saw
So this eyes-
the army,
Okay.
Gehazi. Yeah.
Okay.
So, verse 11, he magnifies himself even to the prince of the host, which is Yeshua, and by him, who's this him now? The little horn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the daily sacrifice was taken away. In the original, the word sacrifice doesn't exist. It says the daily was taken away.
Why?
I'll tell you now. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Whose sanctuary?
God's sanctuary. Is
God's sanctuary.
It's in temple, yeah.
Correct. So the temple was cast down and the daily was taken away.
Yeah.
So whether you say daily or daily sacrifice, it's the same thing. Because if you go back to the Torah, then Yahuwah explains there's three. That's why the Jews also like to pray 3 times a day. So you've got your morning prayer, your afternoon prayer, and your evening prayer. Like you had your morning and your evening sacrifices. That's why when he created, there was morning, it was evening, and it was morning. And when it talks about the 1,260 days, it actually says 1,260 evenings and mornings. Because there's a daily worship done to Yahuwah.
That's why Daniel was praying 3 times a day.
That's why Daniel was praying 3 times a day. Do you understand now? It's called Shachrit.
I thought it's 2 times. But they were they slaughtering a lamb 2 or 3 times? 3 times.
As far as I can see, they slaughtered the lamb actually twice, in the morning and in the evening.
Yeah, but
But-
there was something in.
There was something in the middle as well.
Okay.
That's why Daniel prayed 3 times.
Okay.
It's called Shachrit something and Me'irif.
Okay.
Me'irif is because Eref is dusk. When it starts becoming dark. That's Eref. Eref Shabbat, the evening before Shabbat starts. That's why we celebrate from Eref to Eref. From sundown to sundown. Many people say it's sunset. Sunset and sundown is the same thing. Many people say it's from dawn to dawn. But it's called Eref Shabbat. Eref means, okay, it's interesting. Eref in Hebrew is, you can say the V or the B. Like Abraham can also be Abraham. So Eref can also be Ereb. And we only say Eref because that's how the Masoretic text put the vowels in. Masoretic text put the vowels in. But your A and your R sound is not too far from one another. So Eref can also be pronounced Arab. Arab
Arab.
You know what? To be an Arab. You know what it means?
That's Esau.
It actually means to become dark. Esau was dark. Remember, he was red. Number one. Number two, it means mix. It means when light and darkness starts mixing.
Okay.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
That's Eref,
Arab.
Arab.
Mm.
All right. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So the little horn magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. So number one, is this about end days, or was it in the time of Antiochus?
Sounds like end days.
So it's definitely massively end day prophetic. Because at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, there wasn't a prince of the host yet. Of course, Yeshua has always been the prince of the host. And to stop the daily worship system and to cast down the sanctuary is indeed to magnify yourself above the prince of the host. So again, it's in the time of Antiochus, and it's massively end day prophetic.
And he put his own God there anyway.
Who did he put there?
Zeus.
He put Zeus in the most holy place. And he sacrificed a pig on the altar. So he took away the daily sacrifice and he replaced it with pagan worship system. And a host was given against the daily by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered. So it's this verse is loaded. A host was given to him. Well, the host, he definitely had a lot of fallen angelic demons helping him. There's a difference between astrology and astronomy. Astronomy is beautiful. Astrology is pagan. So he had the heavenly host, he had the demon host, and he had a human host given to him against the daily sacrifice because of transgression. So human and spiritual stronghold is given to the little horn. He has that power to stop the daily sacrifice. Because of transgression, putting Zeus, I mean, it's blasphemy. It's sacrilegious to put Zeus in the place of the Ark of the Covenant, the most holy place of Yahweh. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. And it cast down truth to the ground. So truth, is connected with the daily worship and with the sanctuary. Truth is not just New Testament teaching. Truth is in that beautiful, although it's sacrificial. We can't do sacrifices. Even Daniel didn't do sacrifices, although it's in the Torah. Why don't we do sacrifices? We can't do it. It's against the Torah. It will only be the high priest again that will do it. We're not going to go through all that again. But when you work through the Levitical priesthood sacrificial system, there's so much truth about the life is in the blood. There's no forgiveness of sin without the shedding of blood. There's so much truth in that. There's so much truth in God's Torah regarding the sacrificial blood system. And it says here, he cast truth to the ground. And you know by now, I mean, you've read Maccabees. How he cast down the Torah. He burned it. He killed you if you had a Torah. If he found that you circumcised your son, he killed you. If you came into your town and you didn't want to accept the mark of Tammuz, they actually put they took ash. It's very interesting. And then they marked you with the mark of Tammuz. That's why in the Roman Catholic system, it's called Lent. Or Ash Week. Ash Wednesday. It's all got to do with the
ash.
My grandmother, but she was Catholic, was saying, God seën je en bewaar je.
Yeah, I know.
It's like a blessing.
But that's exactly where it's like when you sneeze, bless you. Where does it come from? Where does the tradition come from? Same with Christmas and Easter and the tree. Those things are not biblical. Where does the traditions come from? So they actually took the ash from the sacrificial altar, from the burnt sacrifice. And then they blessed you on your forehead with a mark of Tammuz. And if you didn't want to allow that, you couldn't enter your town. It's almost like the smart city system and the digital ID we're going to have in the future. If you don't have the mark of the beast, you cannot travel. You will not be able to go into another town. So the people that didn't want to accept the Ash Tammuz sign were killed. The people that didn't want to eat the sacrificial offering to Zeus were killed. Did I read for you? No, I read it when I had the Sukkot camp. There was a woman who had 7 sons, and they refused to take part of the, let's call it the mark of the beast. They refused to eat the sacrificial offering to Zeus.
Yeah, in the time of the Maccabees.
And the Maccabees.
I haven't read the book. I read a story about that.
Well, you need to read the book. They killed one son of hers after the other. And then eventually they killed her. So every time they killed one of the sons, the rest of the sons had a second chance. So it's horrible. If you read that, it's unthinkable. The last son, he even promised him he will make him a prince. Because he had, Antiochus was becoming anxious because there's people that is proving that he's not all-powerful. Because they refuse to worship Zeus. They refuse to worship the image of the beast and to take the mark of the beast. So it will be in the last days as well. That's why it says the dragon will make war against the people that don't worship the image of the beast and don't take the mark of the beast. Because it is a problem for them. Verse 11, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him, by the little horn, in that days Antiochus, in the last days the Antichrist, the daily was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down.
Just a question, what does it mean when Antichrist is breaking the 7-year covenant with Israel?
That's why it says that this Antichrist has a fierce countenance, understand dark sentences, and will make a false covenant. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So the little horn of verse 8 onwards is explained in verse 23 as in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have come to the full. There I talked about it's when transgressions have filled its measure. It's when the cup of the abominations of the whore of Babylon is filled to the brim. Do you remember when God made covenant with Abraham? He said, your seed will go to Egypt and be slaves there, and only when the iniquity of the Amorites are full will it be the appointed time that I bring them out of Egypt back to the promised land. Do you remember that? Genesis 15 verse 6. What did that mean? After the 430 years between the covenant and the actual entrance into the promised land, 430 years, by that time the Amorites and all the Canaanites and all the pagans in Egypt, in Canaan, their abominations was so bad. It was so horrible. It has come to the full. Yahweh had the right to destroy them and judge them. It's the same picture. We will only come out of this Egyptian world into the promised land when the iniquity is fulfilled. The Bible talks about when the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, when the Amorites' iniquity is fulfilled. Here it says when the transgressors have come to the full.
It's like in the time of Noah also, they were
well done.
too evil.
In the time of Noah, it says the following. God saw that the evil inclination, that they had only evil inclination always. Isn't it? There was no longer even any good thought. So now the world is filled with evil, right? But sometimes the evil people can still have good thoughts when they look at their child or their mother or their cat before they sacrifice them. But anyway, sorry about that. But it's not where it's only evil continuously, like in the times of Noah. So when the iniquity was so full that all the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continuously, there was no more chance for any goodness. God said, it has come to the full, now I destroy everything. So there's only 2 destructions. The one with water The second one with fire. So in the last days, when that same thing happens and the thoughts of man's heart is only evil continuously, then Yahweh will destroy everything again. So you see the correlation between Daniel 8 verse 23, when the transgressors are come to the full, and Genesis 15 verse 16. So when this Antichrist stands up and the world becomes evil only continuously, then we know we can witness Yahuwah is Elohim. There's nobody like him, and he's got the right to judge.
I'm thinking, sorry, it's a bit of a topic maybe. I don't know, have you seen the film Equilibrium? It's a bit like this. People couldn't be
Love
nice
Equilibrium.
anymore.
I love Equilibrium.
Yeah.
But you need to look at Equilibrium with backward eyes. You need to understand that it's a movie. You have to watch it.
But what year?
No, I don't know. Can't remember.
don't know.
Like 10, 20 years ago?
No. It's like maybe.
You actually can get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
They show it on
Okay.
YouTube.
So remember, what is the evil empire's name?
No, I can't remember now.
Tetragrammaton.
Oh, yeah.
What is the Tetragrammaton?
Tetra is 4.
Yeah.
What is the Tetragrammaton? If you want to understand Equilibrium,
Yeah.
you need to understand definitions.
Voor tetra.
Tetragrammaton. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey.
Hey.
God, the four letters.
Yeah.
If you Google Tetragrammaton, you'll get Yod, Hey, Vav,
Oh,
Hey.
okay.
So the evil empire's name was Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey.
Okay, I didn't pick that up. Okay.
So this guy that stood, because this evil empire had these laws. Oh, you're not allowed to laugh. You're
Yeah.
not allowed to laugh.
You can't show emotion.
Nothing. Ne? And now this guy stands up and he stands up against Yod Heh Vav Heh. It's a picture of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Because why? He wants to do something better for the world.
Yeah.
You have to look at it.
Yeah, no, that's
Very
quite
interesting.
Deep spiritual.
Very
actually.
deep spiritually. But I enjoyed it. I watched it like 3 times. It's very good. When we get to the fullness of the iniquity and the king of fierce countenance and dark sayings is like, your occult, secret, hidden things of all the secret societies and the world governments and the AI and all that. Ne? We'll go into much more detail in Daniel 11. We're not going to go into it now, because in Daniel 11, you'll see an explanation of the dark sayings and the covenant and the breaking of the covenant and conspiring around one table and fighting against the saints of the Most High. So then we'll go into a deeper understanding of exactly how intelligent the beast is going to be. Very, very intelligent. Now, we read that this little horn comes out from amongst the 4 horns. He waxed great, and he magnifies himself, and he cast down the sanctuary, and a host was given to him by reason of transgression. He practiced, and he prospered, and he cast down truth to the earth. That's in the first half of the chapter. Now the last half of the chapter, Daniel 8 verse 24. His power shall be mighty, but not his own power. So when you read, the last half, we get to the point now where where Gabriel is talking about the little horn. He says his power will be mighty. So Antiochus, his power is mighty, but it's not his own power. What does that mean?
He's possessed by evil. Satan.
So Satan possessed Antiochus. I mean, to do the things he did, he must be possessed. But is there a verse like that? That makes you think about, because Antiochus is a picture of the end-day Antichrist. Is the end-day beast. Is there a verse somewhere about Satan possessing the beast? Or Satan giving power unto the beast? Okay, Revelation 13 verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Do you see Daniel 8:24? Revelation 13 verse 4. So Daniel continues. His power, the little horn's power, both then and in the future, will be mighty, but not by his own power. And he will destroy wonderfully. He will destroy freaking everything. And he will prosper. Remember verse 8? He prospers. Verse 24, he will prosper. And he will practice. Verse 12, he practice. Verse 24, he practice. What do you practice?
Evil.
I practice evil. A practitioner. You practice witchcraft. You practice law. Everything he does in all the sections of society, in all the sections of the Indo world government, he practices and he prospers and he destroys wonderfully. Is it going to be wonderful? No, jy gaan yourself verwonder aan dit. You're going to wonder at it. The Bible says the whole world wondered after the beast. So it's like you are so hypnotized. It is so, it's of such a magnitude that you are just watching it. You can't believe it.
So it's a practice is also, you're not only talking about it, you're actually executing it, or you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's not just talks.
Yeah, it's not like the political leaders when they have their speeches.
Talk.
No, I promise I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it. When the beast promises something, he does it.
He's going to practice it.
So Daniel continues in verse 24. He will destroy, he'll prosper, he'll practice. And listen to this now. And he destroy the mighty and the holy people. How many times have we worked through the little horn in Daniel 7 that the people of God is given into his hands for a season, a time, times and half a time, for the 3.5 years. So here, it's confirmed. In the hand of Antiochus, the mighty and holy people were given into his hand. He destroyed the pleasant land, Jerusalem and all of Israel. He destroyed the people. He tortured the people, the holy people. What is holy? Set apart. He tortured the people who don't want to worship his image. It's exactly the same as the beast. He will torture and destroy the people that don't, exhaust them. And then Daniel 8:25. Daniel says, this little horn, through his policy, what does your translation say? Verse Daniel 8:25. Policy, no? Different translations there by you?
8:25.
Yeah.
By his cunning he shall make the seed prosper under his hand.
Okay, so by his cunning. So his policy, the way in which they make policies today, all the puppets of the beast system, is also cunning. They made a policy, we want to bring in digital ID. How could they get digital ID right if they didn't have COVID 5 years ago? And they brought the digital passport, the vaccine passport in. They opened the way to bring a new policy in by their deceit and their cunningness. They want to bring in something specific, but the people won't accept it. So first they have to create a problem. And then they bring this thing in as a solution. That's cunning. That's deceiving. That's deceptive. So through his policy, your translation says through his cunning, he will cause craft. What is craft?
Craft is also deceiving.
It's crafty. You're very crafty. You're very skillful. If you're crafty, you can get stuff done. You are very good with your hands. Yes. So he's very crafty. He's very skillful in his deception. Who else was called crafty? Satan, the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Do you see the correlation? The beast and the serpent has got the same policy. With craftiness, they want to deceive. So he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Because he's a manipulator. He's a puppet master. He's got the whole global system under his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart. Remember, the little horn has a mouth speaking blasphemies. And by peace, he will destroy many. Do you understand what it says? By peace, he will destroy many. It's like an anticlimax. It's like no, it's not anticlimax.
The mindset, without warning.
Yeah, but dichotomy. It's a dichotomy. When I say peace, it's supposed to be peace.
You're not expecting it.
You're not expecting to be destroyed when there's peace.
Yeah.
So by peace he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. So you remember in verse, where was it? Verse 11. He magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. Now in verse 25, he says, he stand up against the prince of princes. So the prince of the host and the prince of princes is the same thing. Who's the prince of princes?
Sure.
How do you know that?
It's in capital letter.
Well, the Bible says so.
Prince of the host.
But besides that, the Bible says King of kings, Lords of lords, Prince of princes. All right, that's Joshua. So here it confirms the prince of the host is the prince of princes, and there's only one guy that has a name like that, and that's Joshua. Therefore, now that you know, when he talks about the prince, besides it being in capital letters, because in Hebrew there's no capital letters. Now you go read and do my end day studies again about the age to come. Because the last chapters of Zechariah and all those prophets talk about the prince. The prince that will bring the daily sacrifices back. Have you read that? So the daily sacrifices is now stopped because the whole Levitical priesthood system has been stopped. But in the worship during the millennium, it says every Sabbath and every new moon, and Egypt must come for tabernacles, otherwise they won't receive rain, and the east gate will be opened and will no more be shut, and the prince himself will lead the worship to God. So it's consistently, and it shows towards the millennium.
Sorry, I also just want to, interesting thing I saw the other day, the east gate that is shut. Okay, so in the end days he will go through the east gate, which is now shut. So they say on the, maybe you know about it, on the Mount of Olives, archaeologically again, or geologically, in any way, they discovered there's like in an earthquake, a crack.
A fault line.
That's it. Which goes into the direction of the east gate.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's quite something.
Interesting.
Because
it's already been there.
Because why?
Yeah, because if he comes back,
he's going to land with his feet on Mount Olives, and it's going to split in
two.
Amazing, no? Very nice. I love archaeology. Right. Daniel 2 verse 45. So remember, Daniel 8 verse 25. He stands up against the prince of princes, but... So, what does he do? Through his policy, he will cause craft. It will prosper in his hand. He'll magnify himself. Through peace, he will destroy many. He'll stand up against the prince of princes. But, what will happen to him? Verse 25.
He will be broken without hand.
Broken.
How will he be broken?
By Yeshua's hand.
Does it say Yeshua's hand? What does it say?
Without hand.
What is that? I know it's Yeshua's hand. But think about what you've read in scripture, not about what you think. He shall be broken without hand.
Without hand.
Read Daniel 2 verse 45 again. What was broken without a hand?
Oh, the rock that came.
The rock came loose from the mountain without human hands and broke the entire statue. But Daniel 8:25 is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek Empire. So destroying the Greek Empire and destroying the entire statue is in the same sentence being talked about. That's what I'm saying. The entire false religious beast system is typified in the Greek names. Understanding the Greek pagan names is more important than we think. Very, very important. Because all the way from the Egyptian gods, through the Babylonian gods, through the Medes and the Persian gods, they became immortalized in the Greek period. Very interesting regarding the Greek names. Remember that. So it says, by peace he shall destroy many. Now I want to take you to 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. Just listen. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, and they will not escape. You see? I'm going to continue. Remember verse 25 now. The peace and the safety and the destruction thing. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means. For that day, the day of Yeshua's coming, will not come, except there comes a falling away first. What happens at the falling away? Not the rapture. The falling away means apostasy. The people falls away from God because there's no rapture. And then the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. The one in whom Satan goes in. Like the only other son of perdition was?
Judah.
Judas Iscariot. When Satan went into Judas to betray Yeshua. But he was a Jew. He was from the inner circle, blah, 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 the whole thing.
So it's also a bit when Israel is without fences and lives in peace. Yeah, then he will come.
Physically.
Or then it will start actually.
Yes, physically and spiritually. Physically, because they will rule the world as the whore of Babylon. As the head office of the world government.
Israel now.
Israel.
Okay.
Especially Jerusalem. Because the beast must sit in the temple. That's where? In London? No, in Jerusalem. In America? No, in Jerusalem.
And then literally it will also be peace.
Yeah, literally. And then spiritually. When will Jerusalem or Israel be without borders? When will it be without defenses?
I think when they conquered the enemies around them.
No, wait. Spiritually.
Spiritually.
Physically, we touched.
Okay.
Spiritually.
When the Antichrist sits on his...
Yes.
Yeah.
But what has to happen before the Antichrist is revealed? It says...
He has to have to build a temple.
All those things. But what will make spiritually Jerusalem without defenses? On a spiritual level? Okay, so there's a verse where Paul says, I don't need to write to you. You all know exactly what it's going to be. But when he that keeps is no longer keeping,
the restrainer.
If the restrainer is removed. Okay, so the church is teaching, the restrainer is the Holy Spirit. When the Holy Spirit is removed, because the church is raptured. They don't know their Bibles.
So it's the Angel Michael.
Angel Michael. So there'll be a time when she, Jerusalem, will be without physical or spiritual defenses. Very good. Okay, so he says, let no man deceive you. Then the falling away will come and the Antichrist will be revealed. He who opposes and exalts himself above all that's called God, all that's worshipped, so that he has God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he's God. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth. Remember in Daniel, he cast the truth to the ground. They don't receive the love of the truth, that they will be saved. Ek het vir julle gesê I'm reading out of 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3.
Okay.
I'm still there.
Okay.
And for this cause, for what cause? Because they don't have a love for the truth. God will send them a strong delusion. So they believe the lie. Remember, he's got craftiness and policies and deceivableness. That they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, again, you cannot understand the letters of Paul about the end days without understanding the foundation of what he's talking about. Because these policies, it doesn't mean anything if it's just a change in human policies. It has to be a change in God's policies. So we discussed the mixing of the toes and the feet, where humans are going to get mixed with clay, is going to get mixed with iron. We discussed that in detail. We're not going to go through that again. But that's one of the main things as in the days of Noah. That has to happen again. And then the mixing of the seed, the changing of the times and the laws, the changing of the ordinances, the changing of the genetics, the going back to the serpent seed, the worship of false gods, where it's no longer your decision. You either do it or you get killed. And then he's the one world ruler. So that's his policy. He's a political leader, and yet he's a god. And yet he's a religious figure. Okay, so we compared quite a lot. If you take chapter 8 and you divide it in 2. We read from 8 verse 1 to 8 verse 12. And then we compared from verse 13 onwards to verse 25. There's still more, but our time is up. So I just want to remind you. We started where I reminded you the changing of the times and laws by this little horn is important to understand. God said through Isaiah, the earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. You can see, looking at what God is showing Daniel of the end days, you can see how this is becoming true, how the entire earth will be defiled, because the iniquity of the transgressors must come to the full before God has legal right to judge and destroy. The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant, transgressed the laws, besides just transgressing the Sabbath and the pork and the whatever, transgressing all of God's laws. God's laws about not mixing animals with humans, not mixing humans with whatever angelic Nephilim seed, not mixing male and female hormones. You know, that whole Kabbalah, esoteric, occult, secret society religion. He's changing all of God's laws. One level is Sabbath and pork and all these things. That's one level. But there are many more levels where this Antichrist is going to change God's laws. The earth is defiled because they transgressed the laws. They changed the ordinances. They changed that which God ordained. He ordained family, husband, wife, sun, moon, and stars, days, weeks, and months. We went through that, through the names of the months and the names of the days of the weeks and all that. But I mean, looking at where this world is going, daddy, mummy, children, where's that going? He's changing ordinances.
Daddy, child now.
Yeah, but soon it will be only daddy, and the child will come out of an incubator and out of an AI womb.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's been written in historical fiction books. Go read The Brave New World. How many movies have you watched where they said, oh, it's a brave new world? What are they talking about? Go read the book. Go read the book, The Brave New World. It's horrible. So the earth is defiled because they transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. He makes a covenant. Oh, he's going to bring the covenant God made. He's going to bring that to Israel, Because what is the covenant God made with Abraham? Promised land. But all your seed. Where's the seed? He makes it with only the Jews and surrounding whatever that's going to be. We can talk for hours about that. What about the lost sheep of the 10 tribes? They're not reconciled yet. So number one, he's in no position to make a covenant. God has made the covenant. God is the one that will bring Abram, Isaac, and Jacob into the promised land. No human being, especially not the beast. But now he makes the covenant and then he breaks it. Remember? In the midpoint, he breaks the covenant. So then he becomes, like the Bible says, the woman rides the beast, and then the kings of the earth burns the woman.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting. So he breaks the everlasting covenant. He's not such a nice guy as everyone thinks. Therefore the curse devours the earth. All they that dwell will be burnt. Only a few men will be left. Right, that's the end of our first half of Daniel chapter 8.